Hey, what's going on guys, this is AndrewChicken and welcome back to another video. Flanks are an important class in Paladins for getting behind enemy lines, killing healers, harassing enemy damage champions, and finishing off kills. The flank class in Paladins is incredibly diverse, with some flankers being highly mobile assassins, other flankers being high DPS champions who belong in the damage class, and one flanker who can even fill the role of a healer. There's also a bit of a divide in the flank class between champions who are more effective on controller versus PC, because some flankers require a lot of rapid flick shots and movements that are simply easier to perform on keyboard and mouse. Because of this, trying to find the best flank in Paladins is a difficult task, since everyone you ask is going to have a different opinion on the matter. And honestly, this is a pretty good thing. It means that the flank class is decently balanced among its different champions, since it's not as clear who the strongest flank is compared to the damage class, for example. However, there are still some flank champions who are just a bit more effective than their peers, which is why in today's video, I'll be going over the top 5 strongest flank champions in Paladins. Now before we get started, I want to mention that this video is influenced by you, the members of this wonderful community. I made a poll asking which flank champions you guys think are the strongest, and there was quite a diverse spread of answers to each of the rankings. However, this poll still helped me decide which champions to put on this list, and there was actually a pretty clear winner for the number 1 spot, so watch until the end to see who that champion is. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get straight into the video. Number 5. Buck. In the number 5 spot we have everyone's favorite former magistrate soldier turned bald asthmatic monk with a shotgun, Buck. Buck is one of the few champions who, if you see him at a high level on the enemy team, you know you're in for a beating. Now, if you've ever fought an experienced Buck player, you know exactly why he's on this list. Bounce House turns Buck into one of the best champions in the game for bursting enemies and snowballing one kill into an entire team wipe. He can jump into the air, shoot an enemy, and then land on them and shoot them again for a massive burst of damage, and if he gets a headshot during all that, the enemy is as good as dead. Then, with this reset card, he can get all his cooldowns almost completely reset, letting him do the same thing again to the next person in his sights, or get out of a sticky situation if necessary. Buck is by far one of the best champions for diving in, getting a kill, and jumping away. However, if you want a more civilized and safe approach to playing Buck, he has 2 other fantastic talents. Ensnare lets him get bonus damage after ensnaring an enemy, and with this lifesteal card, he gets some of the best sustain in the entire flank class. This is also his best talent for fighting tanks, since he can't exactly sustain a fight with tanks using Bounce House. Alternatively, Buck can become a tank by using Bulk Up in his wicked damage reduction cards. Through his sheer amount of effective HP using this build, he becomes one of the hardest flanks to kill, especially in the early game before people have Cauterize 3. Buck has 3 viable and unique playstyles, and all of them are extremely difficult to fight against as an enemy. If you can master Buck, you can crush enemies left and right, and if you want help learning about Buck's builds and playstyles, I have a whole guide linked in the cards and description covering how he works. However, Buck does have his drawbacks. First of all, Buck's cooldown reset card relies on him earning a killing blow, so if he dives in and gets his kill stolen or he can't finish his target, he's as good as dead, since he doesn't have many retreat options unlike others in the flank class. Buck also lacks long-range damage, since he has a shotgun, which is a close-ranged weapon. While Ensnare can give him a bit more poke, it's still not as good as some of his counterparts in the flank class. So, Buck has 2 options: dive in and get a kill, or be pretty much useless. However, Buck's kit and cards still make him extremely good at diving enemies and bursting them down, and he's also one of the tankiest flanks, which makes him good at fighting other flanks who have similar DPS to him like Maeve and Eevee. Because of this, Buck earns the number 5 spot on this list. Number 4. Xin. Oh, Xin, the cockroach of the flank class. Xin is one of the hardest flanks to kill because he has numerous options to block or evade damage. Of course, he has his infamous counter, which is able to block everything from bullets to arrows to bombs. While it doesn't block certain things like Genesis ult, it still blocks almost everything in the game. It can even delete Eevee's Blizzard from existence, which probably shouldn't be the case, but it is anyways. Xin also has his Billow, which makes him ethereal. This basically means that he can walk through enemies and can't be hit by status effect, crowd control, or damage. Basically, he's immortal for the duration of his Billow, so whatever his counter doesn't protect him from, his Billow makes up for. Or he can use counter and then follow it up with a Billow to make the enemies really irritated that he's not taking damage. And of course, Xin can also just use his Whirl for a tactical retreat or dodge if there's some incoming damage. And he can even use his ultimate for the same purpose, to hard retreat over a wall or some other obstacle. Xin just has so many ways to not take damage, it's actually kind of ridiculous. And on top of all of this survivability, Xin has some pretty good damage too. While he's not the burstiest champion in the flank class, his damage is solid, and can be enhanced through the talent Yomi. He can also combo one of his primary shots with his Whirl for a decent burst of damage, which can also help him dodge damage at the same time. And of course, on top of all of this, Xin has the option to use Guillotine, which lets his ultimate deal 100% of the target's HP as damage over its duration. It's been nerfed over and over again, and now it's to the point that Guillotine isn't a free kill if the target gets a tiny heal or a little bit of damage reduction. However, it still deals a boatload of damage, and anyone who gets hit by Guillotine will need their teammates to help them if they want to survive. Of course, this does put Xin in a vulnerable, stationary position while he's ulting, but when used smartly, Xin's ultimate with Guillotine can be a super helpful tool for getting a kill. Now of course, Xin does have his drawbacks. Like I said, his damage is only average when it comes to the flank class. He doesn't have nearly as much burst as his counterparts, and his DPS is on the low side too. So without a serious level of cauterize, Xin struggles a bit more than other champions to kill things when there's powerful healers on the opposing team. Xin also lacks range, just like Buck. His projectiles disappear after just 90 units, and while his heavy hit does have a longer range, he only gets a heavy hit every third shot. While he can get close to the enemies with his whirl, he still doesn't have as much mobility as others in his class. These drawbacks keep him back from being considered the strongest flank, but because he's so hard to kill while having solid damage, he earns the number 4 spot on this list. Number 3. Vatu. Vatu is the newest flank in the realm, and he brings speed, style, and efficiency with his playstyle. Not only does he have the best gold skin in the game, and one of the best skins in general, but he has the best mobility in the game too, with his set of 3 omnidirectional dashes and his ambush. He can teleport right up to an enemy, use his dashes to juke them, and still have dashes left to retreat after they're dead, which is absolutely phenomenal. And he has 2 talents which buff his mobility to the next level. Omnipresence lets him teleport to his teammates as well as the enemies, which lets him use his teammates as a way to retreat if he still has a charge of his ambush. This talent also gives him 3 charges of his ambush, which is 50% more mobility on that particular ability. Enveloping Shadows gives him even more utility, as it reduces all his active cooldowns by 15% each time he hits his kunai. This lets him spam his dash and ambush like crazy, and it only gets crazier as Vatu buys Chronos. This talent also lets him use his Shadow Bombs more often, which is crucial for his burst combo. Speaking of his burst combo, Vatu has a nasty burst combo that lets him delete an enemy in about 1 second. Immediately after throwing his first set of kunai for 900 damage, Vatu can throw his Shadow Bombs, and if he hits all 3 Shadow Bombs, it'll do an additional 600 damage. Then, he can follow up with another set of kunai, and that's 2400 damage in the matter of a second when starting from the first throw. And, for even more burst, Vatu can use his ultimate in a fight too, for a near instant 800 damage stun when used in close quarters. After stunning an enemy, he can hit the burst combo on an enemy super easily, and effectively get a free kill. And with these 2 cards, Vatu can spam his ultimate like crazy. Speaking of cards, Vatu also has good sustain and damage reduction in his loadouts. He can use a variety of cards to make himself tougher to kill and keep him alive in a fight, and this card which heals him on dash is particularly effective, since he dashes so often. Vatu is extremely effective, but like Xin and Buck before him, he has some drawbacks. The most glaring weakness of Vatu is that he's super reliable on his mobility, so cripples will completely destroy him. Stuff like Grover's Deep Roots, Imani's Frost Bomb, Vora's Dark Siphon, and many other abilities put Vatu in serious danger, and while they can definitely be countered by resilience, they still interrupt Vatu's gameplay and hinder his performance. Vatu also lacks range, since you're only hitting one of his 3 kunai at long range, and they also have damage fall off the farther they travel. While Vatu's mobility lets him get in close quarters very quickly, sometimes that's not feasible, in the case of a highly grouped up team for example. This makes him a bit less flexible than other flanks, since he has to be up close and personal to be effective. Still, Vatu is by far one of the most effective flanks in the game due to his extraordinary mobility and high burst, which earns him the number 3 spot on this list. Number 2. Vora. Vora is the second most recent flank in the game after Vatu, and she's got a lot of unique abilities in her kit that make her an all-around phenomenal champion. Vora has everything you could possibly want in a flank: good damage, good range, great mobility, solid self-healing, and 2 phenomenal ways to block damage completely. Her primary fire is one of the longest ranged attacks in the flank class, and it deals pretty solid damage to whoever it hits. And whenever she hits an enemy, it gives her a darkness stack. Vora can have up to 5 darkness stacks, and whenever she uses her Dark Siphon or Obliterate, she uses up all of her stored darkness stacks. Each darkness stack that she expends heals her for 100 HP, and if she uses 5 darkness stacks, her Dark Siphon and Obliterate become even stronger. At base, her Dark Siphon is another projectile similar to her primary fire that deals 600 damage over 1.5 seconds. With max darkness stacks, Dark Siphon also cripples the enemy it hits, which is a completely unique ability for a flank to have. The only other flank with a cripple is Eevee, and that's only on her ultimate. This cripple makes Vora an extremely powerful flanker, especially against champions like Kinessa and Saris, who tend to use their movement abilities when Vora gets close. Her Obliterate gives her a brief period of complete damage immunity when she uses it, which lets her dodge powerful abilities like Sky's Time Bomb or a headshot from Kinessa. It also does 500 damage in a small impact area when Vora hits the ground, and it deals 800 damage when Vora has 5 darkness stacks. Both of these abilities are helpful to have in their own right, and become super powerful when Vora gets all of her darkness stacks. And the nice thing about Vora is that she can farm up her darkness stacks from a distance due to her range, and she gets her stacks from anything from players to shields to deployables. So she can sit back, whittle away at a target's health until she gets 5 darkness stacks, and then use her Tendril, which is basically a fancy Grover Vine, to get in close, use her Dark Siphon and Obliterate, and finish off the enemy. And of course, if you're ever taking too much damage with Vora, you can just use her ultimate, which gives her complete damage immunity as you're casting it, damage reduction while you're moving around for the next 5 seconds, and damage immunity when you lock onto an enemy to slash them. Her ultimate basically acts as a get out of jail free card from large amounts of damage, and if she locks onto a target that has below 66% of their HP, she instantly kills them. This is a powerful ultimate both for retreating to a safer position and also disposing of a tank or any other priority target. Vora's kit is super strong by itself, but she also has really good talents and cards as well. She has a variety of cards which give her additional healing and cooldown reduction, and she also has a card which gives her damage reduction on her Vine, which is super helpful to have for her survivability. Her talents are all pretty good as well. Relentless Presence straight up gives her double the amount of mobility, which is ridiculously powerful, and Unyielding Pressure gives her even more damage on her Dark Siphon, which scales from the target's maximum health pool. And Deafening Silence, which isn't really her most popular talent, gives her even more crowd control, as it lets her silence an enemy when she uses Obliterate, without even needing any darkness stacks. Vora's only weakness is her mobility. While it is really strong, it's not as flexible as something like a dash, since Vora only gets good distance out of her Tendril when she has a high wall, pull, or ceiling to latch onto. Also, some maps have walls that seem like you should be able to latch onto them, but you actually can't, limiting Vora even further in certain areas of some maps. Despite this, Vora has a phenomenal base kit, and her cards and talents are also super helpful. Because of this, she is without a doubt one of the strongest flanks in the game, and earns the number 2 spot on this list. Now, before we get into the number 1 spot, I want to take a second to talk about Maeve and Eevee, 2 popular flank champions who many people voted to be placed somewhere on this list. Maeve, Eevee, and Vatu are all similar champions. They have very similar DPS, ranging from 800 to 900, and they are all renowned for having some of the best mobility in the game. However, what Maeve and Eevee do well, Vatu simply does better. When it comes to Maeve, Vatu is basically just a better version of her, with slightly less poke. While Maeve does outrange him, her mobility is downright inferior to Vatu's. Instead of having a prowl, Vatu can just instantly teleport to an enemy or ally with omnipresence. Instead of having 1 pounce, maybe 2 if you use 9 lives, Vatu has 3 pounces which don't get denied if you accidentally hit an enemy with them. Vatu's ultimate is arguably more useful than Maeve's, since an on-demand stun is more helpful for securing kills in most cases than a 4-second blind, since players with good game sense or a reveal can still track and kill Maeve during her ult. And of course, there's Vatu's Burst combo, which is a set of kunai followed immediately by his Shadow Bombs. This deals more damage than Maeve's Burst combo, which is a set of daggers followed by a pounce that's generally used to finish off a target. Of course, this is assuming you're not using Street Justice on a tank. Don't use Street Justice on a tank, they've been through enough, okay? When it comes to Eevee, it's a bit less of a straightforward comparison. Both have a teleport, and arguably Eevee's gives her more freedom, since there doesn't have to be an enemy or teammate nearby. Her soar also gives her some really good juke potential, but so do Vatu's dashes. She has more poke than Vatu too, since she fires one shot which deals 850 damage at any range. And of course, she has her Ice Block, which can be a lifesaver when timed properly. A good Eevee can wipe the floor with an enemy team, just like Vatu. And, just like Vatu, Eevee gets hard countered by Cripples and Leon. There are a few reasons for putting Vatu on this list instead of Eevee, however. First of all, and most importantly, Vatu is way more reliable and consistent due to the nature of each champion's cooldowns. If Eevee wants to snowball kills and wipe a team, she must land killing blows to reset her cooldowns with these 2 cards here, and resetting cooldowns requires a significant investment of loadout points. If someone steals a kill or she can't finish a target, she simply has to wait to get her cooldowns back, and this puts her in a risky situation. Vatu, on the other hand, can lower his cooldowns just by hitting his shots consistently using the talent Enveloping Shadows. It requires no investment of loadout points, and if a teammate steals Vatu's kill, that's no problem at all. You only need to be good at aiming to reliably reduce your cooldowns with Vatu. And with just a little bit of Chronos, Vatu pretty much always has a dash up, and his Ambush and Shadow Bombs are frequently available too. Secondly, Eevee is simply way harder to use than Vaatu, especially on controller. While both require more skill than someone like, say, Lex, Vaatu is still easier than Eevee because his dashes are much easier to juke with than Eevee's soar, especially while on controller. Vaatu doesn't require nearly the same level of flick shots that Eevee does, which is good for both controller players and newer players alike. I have first-hand experience with playing both of these champions on PC and controller, and while Eevee was torture on controller, Vaatu was, for the most part, a breeze. And third of all, Vaatu simply has much better sustain and damage reduction than Eevee with these cards here. Eevee does have some sustain, yes, but she has no damage reduction, and she has the smallest health pool in the game. When the enemies are good at aiming, or you're up against a Leon, Vaatu simply has a better time sustaining hits than Eevee does. And of course, because Eevee, Vaatu, and Maeve are also similar, it means they all get countered by the same things. Any form of cripple is a death sentence for these champions, and Leon has no trouble dealing with all of them, since all three primarily stay alive by juking the enemies, not by having high health pools or damage mitigating abilities. Because of this, I decided to put Vaatu on this list and not Eevee or Maeve. However, just because Eevee and Maeve didn't make it onto this list shouldn't discourage you from trying both of these champions. If you can learn how to master them, they become some of the most fun champions to play in the game, and I'm personally of the opinion that on keyboard and mouse, Eevee is the most fun flanker in the game. If you want guides to help you improve at or get started playing either of these champions, I'll have both guides linked in the cards and description. I highly recommend you go check them out. Anyways, let's crack on with the number 1 spot. Number 1. Androxus. And in the number 1 spot we have the best flank champion in Paladins as voted by the community by a pretty large margin, Androxus. Like Evora, Androxus has good damage, good range, a great tool for survivability, and some fantastic mobility. With his most popular talent, Curse Revolver, he can burst down a target in 1.5 seconds or less by shooting them 3 times, then quickly punching them if they're in close quarters, which is an insanely fast time to kill, and it only gets faster if he hits a headshot. Curse Revolver also gives Androxus some pretty good range. While he does have damage falloff at longer ranges, he still has way better poke than a lot of the champions I've mentioned earlier. And of course, in close range, he's a juggernaut of burst. He has his burst combo, like I mentioned earlier, which only gets more powerful with the Defiant Fist talent. This talent increases the damage that his punch does with every shot you hit with your primary fire up to 100% of its regular damage. Combine this with his powerful cards that heal him and give him wicked amounts of ultimate charge when he kills someone with his punch, and you've got a powerful and bursty melee finisher build that is really fun to play. Androxus' reversal is also a really helpful tool for blocking massive amounts of damage and even killing other champions. It absorbs all incoming damage, and then sends most of it back towards the enemy, so the more they feed it, the more damage they take. While Reversal doesn't block all types of damage, like Terminus' Axe for example, it blocks most things, and is actually a great counter to stuff like Terminus' ult. When timed properly, this can be a helpful ability for survivability and dealing damage, and it's also a crucial way to reset the cooldown of his Nether Step with this card here. In fact, with a build such as this, you can reset the cooldown of his Nether Step, instantly reload upon activating Reversal, and then spam Reversal by reducing its cooldown drastically each time you hit an enemy. His Nether Step is also some pretty solid mobility, both for traveling towards an enemy and juking enemies while in a fight. Unlike Evora's mobility, it doesn't rely on walls to use it, which makes it much more reliable and flexible than her mobility. Apart from it being on the louder side, this is a perfect ability for a flanker to have. Also, if you master flick shots, you can dart around an enemy and kill them while looking really cool, which gives Androxus some serious style points. And Androxus has some really helpful cards for his Nether Step, such as this one, which gives him some pretty decent self-sustain, and this one, which allows him to zoom around faster than a blue mutant hedgehog. His ultimate is also pretty helpful for bursting down an enemy, since it rapidly fires 4 explosive shots which do 1,000 damage each. They don't apply cauterize, and they do make Androxus a bit of a target, but with tactful use of cover and the element of surprise, this ultimate can be a game changer during a pivotal point fight. Honestly, it's hard to think of a downside to this champion apart from his survivability, since he doesn't have something as powerful as Zin's Billow or Vora's Obliterate. But apart from that, his damage output is strong, his mobility is fantastic, his ultimate is great, and he has some powerful and useful cards to boot. He's not that hard to get into, but has room for some skillful and strategic gameplay, and he's got a variety of different playstyles which can all be effective in the right circumstances. All of this makes Androxus an effective, fun, and powerful flanker, who deserves the number 1 spot on this list. But anyways, that's going to be the end of the video. What do you think of my list? Do you agree with the champions on this list, or do you think someone else deserves to be number 1? Let me know in the comments section down below, and also don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content like this from me. Also make sure to check out my Twitch channel and Discord server linked in the description. I stream regularly on Twitch, and I also have a fantastic and active community on Discord, so if you're looking for players to party up, you know where to go. Anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.